Hi class, in this video I'm going to go over our assignment for week 5, lesson planning effective strategies. Now this is the second lesson plan that you are writing for this course, and it's not much different than the first lesson planning assignment that we had. So for this one, you are looking at those instructional strategies that you're using throughout your lesson planning, and you're ensuring that you're embedding those throughout your plan. And so you're thinking about how can I include opportunities for students to use critical thinking, problem solving, questioning, and mathematical discourse, as well as academic vocabulary development in your plan. And you're also thinking about the differentiation strategies that you're using for your students as outlined on the class profile. So, when you are writing this plan, I want you to think about those strategies that we've been talking about in each of the weeks and embed some of those strategies within your plan. So, for example, we have just got done talking about the use of manipulatives in the classroom and how beneficial hands on materials are. Now, hands on materials are great for all ages, even through high school. So, even if you're choosing to teach a fifth grade lesson in your plan or a sixth grade lesson in your plan, there's still going to be use of manipulatives. For example, in sixth grade, students are introduced to two really important new concepts. The ratios and proportions, for example, are one concept that's really hard for a sixth grader to learn. So they can model ratios and proportions using cubes. For example, there is two boys for every girl in this classroom. They can model that using blocks. So know that as you're planning those your lesson, I'm looking for some of those strategies that you have been learning, some of those questioning strategies. How are you giving students opportunities to think critically before you're revealing information, before you're teaching them, before you're showing them? What opportunities are you providing for them to do the thinking rather than the teacher? So, as always on my lesson plans in this course, you can use the 5E lesson plan or the traditional lesson plan template. I really like the 5E lesson plan for math because it is more of a constructivist approach. Let's take a moment to look at that plan. All right, so here's the 5E lesson plan template. It's not that different from your traditional lesson plan template, but the way the lesson rolls out really lends itself to more of a constructivist way of teaching. And so the biggest difference is you have a lesson focus question in which you'll have students kind of being answering this idea of a focus question. So, for example, if I was doing multiplication problem, I could ask, how can we, make equal groups, or something just very general that's going to lend to that idea of equal groups and multiplication. And then you'll be thinking through that possible answers. What are you actually looking for students to say with that question? You'll have your key vocabulary. Make sure that you include either a strategy here for teaching the key vocabulary or down below in the explain section. Then you're going to list some of those ways that you can differentiate for your students throughout the plan. Now, when we get to the actual 5E plan, this is where instruction happens. I really look for step by step instructions of what are you going to do. Any teacher should be able to pick up your lesson plan and follow it and teach that lesson. So, the level of detail that you give is very important. For example, instead of saying, I will give students a worksheet, you should be explaining what you're going to give them. Give me a link to the worksheet, or explain how you're going, what questions you're going to ask. In the engage phase, that's more of our anticipatory set, how we activating prior knowledge, linking previous learning, and just presenting the objective and focus question. You don't actually need to do any teaching in the engage phase. You're just getting students excited about learning and seeing what they already know. The teaching in the 5E lesson plan comes after the explore phase in the explain phase. So in um, some of our discussion questions in the previous weeks, we talked about teaching through problem solving. What this means is that the students would be working to solve a problem first before I give them any strategies to solve it. So, in that explore phase, you should be giving students a problem that they're going to go explore. So, in my multiplication example, you can give them something like, we are having guests over for a party, and we want to make sure we buy enough drinks for all of our guests. So we're going to buy 2 drinks for all of our guests, and we are having 7 guests over. How many drinks are we going to need to make sure that we buy? Now, before I model for students, you can use repeated addition to figure this out. You can make equal groups of circles and dots, or you can use these manipulatives and build an array. Those are all strategies I want students to explore on their own, so they're the ones doing the critical thinking on how they can solve this problem. So students would engage using manipulatives, using drawings, they could work together and really explore this idea of multiplication. Then in the explain phase, you have a discussion. You have students reveal their thinking. What did they come up with from the explore phase? They'll share their strategies, you'll talk about them, you'll compare and contrast them, and then you'll go into your opportunity to teach. This is where teaching happens in the 5E lesson plan, in the direct instruction area. So here now you're going to formally introduce multiplication. You'll introduce the vocabulary here. You'll show them different, you'll talk about those strategies that you had in the discussion and possibly chart them out and give them a name. You might show, like, oh, Sarah's strategy, that's what we call repeated addition. I'm going to make a concept chart of repeated addition. That way, if we want to use it again, we know how Sarah did it. And then you'll include how you can differentiate. So, how are we supporting our ELLs? Most of the students on our class profile say that their ELL level is a 4 or 5. That means they understand English really well. They just need more academic language. That means translations are not actually very appropriate for their needs. They don't need you to talk to them in Spanish. They need help with their academic English language. So, word banks, visuals, hands on, sentence frames, those are all ways to support language without translating to their native language. Special ed students often benefit from things like, you might limit the problems or the size of the numbers. You might say they're only going to work with multiplying up numbers up to 5. Or you might give them a graphic organizer or a template that they can use that might have spaces where they can write the equation, like blank times blank equals, so they, the format that you're looking for. Or you might give them manipulatives. They also, ELL and special education students often benefit for some of the same strategy, like hands-on and visuals. And then our gifted students, how can we challenge them? They're not usually very keen on being helpers because they know how to do it and they don't understand why our other students don't. They want a challenge. So give them harder problems, bigger numbers, more, let them go explore. If they show they know how to do it, let them go off and explore. Then you get to your elaborate section, and that's really just, now that we've learned what multiplication officially is, how are we going to practice? So you can give them a worksheet if you wanted to. I really love to give students games. They have more fun with games, so I could give them a set of cards or a dice and have them roll and multiply. Or I could give them an online activity using some of the technology we explored in our week 1 assignment. So get creative here. Worksheets are not my favorite in math. There's so many other ways that are more engaging for students that don't involve a worksheet, like some of these games and online activities. And then evaluate, just how are you going to make sure that students met that objective? So what's your assessment? If you just say a worksheet, that's not enough detail. I need to know what's going to be on the worksheet. I need to know they're going to be doing 10 multiplication problems, or you can say an exit ticket that has the problem 5 times 7 on it. So just be really specific there. And then how are we going to support our language learners? In the rationale, just go ahead and explain 3 instructional strategies you use and how they support collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. I should see those 4 words throughout your rationale. So, for example, I had students work on problem solving or doing a problem solving, and that supported collaboration and critical thinking and creativity because students were able to come up with their own solution strategies. They worked with a partner and they really had to think critically about that problem. And I didn't give them any direction on how to solve that problem before they actually had to jump in and solve it. And so explain how it supports some of these different, the 4 C's here. So that's the 5E lesson plan. It's my preference to see you guys use this just because it really supports with our constructivist strategies, but it's not mandatory. You can always use the traditional template as well. So the rubric for this is exactly the same as the other lesson plan rubric that we did. So we've got the classroom and student factors and grouping. So just make sure you tell me how many English language learners, how many special education students, and some of those things, what the class consists of, and then some strategies or groupings that you're going to be thinking about in your plan. Your standards and your learning targets. Make sure that your standard is clearly identified and any objectives or learning targets are aligned to that. And then everything you do in your plan is aligned to your objectives. So if you're having students explore multiplication, I should see that in your assessment. I should see that in your teaching. I should see that in all of the activities that you have students do. And you might have them explore vocabulary as well, but you don't have to write a separate vocabulary objective. And often, unless it's a specific vocabulary lesson, we don't tend to assess vocabulary at the end of each lesson. How are you incorporating the academic language, and are you identifying those terms and a strategy for teaching them? We have our resources and materials. Like I said, hands-on are always a great thing to add in there to enhance your lesson and support diverse learners. We've graded that anticipatory set. And then the multiple means areas. We've got the representation, which is how teacher teaches and represents the content. We have engagement, which is how students engage with the content, and vocabulary. What are the students doing to practice? Expression is your area of assessment. How are you making sure that students are meeting your objective? And then your extension activity. This should be aligned to your objective as well, and it could be more practice of the same thing, or it can extend their learning beyond what they've already done. So it might include some word problems or some real life activities. Go home and find equal groups in your cupboard or things like that. And then your reflection and mechanics. And so this is how your lesson plan assignment will be graded. If you have any questions as you're working through this assignment, don't hesitate to reach out.